Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Beyond Second Cognition. I'm Beall. The topic of this discussion is hereditary sameness, the plague of the Hapiym mind virus. This is liable to be a bit of a more intellectual discussion, and I'm going to break it down into understandable terms. So if you feel like this stuff is sort of talking over your head at the start, just bear with me and go through the presentation, and it'll all get sorted out in the end. The first thing I want to do is present the idea that was noted by Gustav Le Bon in his book, The Psychology of Socialism. What he noted in that book, and it's very accurately true, is that socialism is more of a belief than it is an ideology. And I will get to more of that. But I want to read a couple of short paragraphs out of that same book, The Psychology of Socialism, to put a high note on part of where humanity's consciousness is trapped. Within that volume, Le Bon notes, "Our vision of things, therefore, is always a deformed vision, but we have no suspicion of this deformation. We are even generally persuaded that it cannot exist. It is almost impossible for us to admit that other men can think and act otherwise than exactly as we ourselves think and act. This incomprehension has for its final result an absolute intolerance, above all in respect of beliefs and opinions which repose entirely on the sentiments. All those who profess different opinions to our own religion, morals, art, or politics immediately become, in our eyes, a person of dubious character, or at least lamentable imbeciles. We also consider it our strict duty, as soon as we possess the power, rigorously to persecute such dangerous monsters. If we no longer burn them and guillotine them, it is because the decadence of manners and the regrettable mildness of laws oppose such proceedings." What Le Bon has just pointed out in these couple of paragraphs is herd mentality. It is the regimentation of collectivist hive thinking. And he's totally correct in his assessment. Once we join the herd, it's time to persecute anybody that disagrees with our particular herd beliefs or ideologies. It's always they're the idiots, not me. Their ideology is wrong, not ours. And so the game goes. And this is how it's been throughout human history. Leading from one religion to another, they're all the same. They all may profess a different superficial doctrine, but when it comes down to it in the final tally, it's all collectivist mentality. Join the herd, be the herd, agree with the herd, and if you don't agree with the herd, well, we'll kill you. And human history is a testimony to this, so there's really no room for denying this aspect of it. The fact is, humanity in the first cognition world controlled by the Hapiym mind virus is deformed, is convoluted, is twisted, and it's upside down. What you think is good is not good, and what you think is bad is not necessarily bad. It all depends on who dictates the moral standards and who dictated them to them. Tradition passes this on. We wind up being born into our respective cultures, and we start getting indoctrinated with it, and we have no choice. We have to buy the shit that our parents teach us, or that the culture teaches, or that the educational system teaches. So every perception we have is shaped by others, and it has been an ongoing process. Cultures are formed through traditions, and traditions are long-lasting and hardly ever overthrown. The tradition is what makes me who I am, and I've discussed this in previous videos, and I've definitely discussed it in depth in my books. Religions have been the form of regimenting consciousness, and the hive has been behind formulating religions for the past 5,000 years. Like I said, the superficial doctrines may vary, but the regimentation and collectivist mindset never does vary. It passes on from generation to generation without changing. It's hereditary sameness. So what I want to point out, and what Le Bon accurately noted, is that socialism is just religion repackaged. What Marx did was get rid of the metaphysical spiritual God and replace it with the new God called the state. So far as the structural nature of it, the belief in the ideology, it's no different than any other religion. It's just a religion based on materialism. The state becomes the God. The state is the all-wise entity that replaces God in the religious framework. But so far as how religions are structured compared to Marxism, it's all the same shit, folks. It's all the same shit. Just because they change the words and replace God with the state doesn't mean that it's any different. It still plays on the same mental poison that the hive has injected every place in every human culture. As I discussed in the Energetic War Against Humanity, the 6,000 War Against Human Cognitive Advancement, the hive has been working to subjugate humanity for the past 6,000 years at least. And by subjugate, I mean doing it on a knowing basis. This really amped up in the 15th century, which was about the time the Renaissance started, and the reintroduction of mystical traditions, the importation of ideas from the East into the West, which is where a lot of these mystical concepts were laid by the hive through Hinduism and hijacked Buddhism and things of that nature. And it's been a concerted effort to push this shit forward for a collectivized humanity to give up its individual consciousness and buy into hive collective consciousness. One of the most revealing books I've read is written by the theosophist and Fabian, Alice Bailey, called The Externalization of the Hierarchy. Because in that book, when you have the pieces assembled correctly and when you can turn reality that they present on its head to actually see through what they're telling you, the hive is telling you its agenda. I mean, it's right there in your face telling you exactly what they've been doing and how long they've been doing it and what they intend to do. But it's all masked because it's inverted. The picture is upside down. I discussed in the video the two definitions of ego, the difference between what the hive considered ego in the spirit and what individual ego is in comparison to the hive infection. Everything in theosophy professes perfecting the soul, but the soul that they're talking about was the hive fucking virus. There was no soul. It was the hive virus, and they wanted you to give up your waking conscious state, stop being a human, and connect with this inner soul, which was the hive virus, so you could connect to the hive. In a nutshell, that's what the inversion was all about. So they prettied it up with this swill about love and light and the heavenly hosts, and ideally what the hive wanted to do was shut down human consciousness and turn it all into a hive collective to where the dead personalities of those humans who had died and been infected and moved on to the hive could come back down here and insert their personalities into walking human beings who had destroyed their own sense of self. They would become nothing more than hive drones and hive robots. And this is why they're pushing this transhumanist shit. Because even in Bailey's book in 1956, they were saying we have to develop a new form into which we can put the consciousness of the heavenly host. Well, the heavenly host was the hive, folks. So they've been pushing this transhumanist shit, and the Theosophists and Fabians have been involved in this shit since about the turn of the 20th century, you know, and I've covered this in my books. This is not a new thing. This is not something that's technologically just happened. They've been planning this shit for well over a century. And it's forecasted in the externalization of the hierarchy. But the book is also laden with a lot of spell work. I've told you about the hydromancy aspect. Words and mantras and phrases and prayers, these are all other forms of giving up your power. They tout in that book the Great Invocation. It threads all throughout Theosophy. The Great Invocation is nothing but a spell to give up your power, and they want you to repeat it often, just like they want mantras in Hinduism and Buddhism and things like that. They're all designed to steal your consciousness, to put you under the spell so the hive could manipulate your awareness. Anybody that picks up any of that shit, don't read the Great Invocation, because it's spell-laden. The words themselves are a spell, and as much as you want to protest that, there is a lot of validity in spell work. When someone creates a saying like that and then embeds energies into it to tyrannize people through their ignorance, it sounds one way, but it does something else. It does something completely the opposite. And there are other passages in the book as well that are enspelled. But the beauty of the hierarchy, the externalization of the hierarchy book, is that the hive is telling you straight out what they're going to do. But until you know how to interpret what soul means and what heavenly host means and what bringing heaven down on earth means in that context, it all sounds nice and smarmy and spiritually wonderful. But when you invert the picture, you're seeing nothing but a gigantic takeover of a species that they want to put your personal consciousness to sleep so this hive virus could have taken over the world. Fortunately, the hives were put out of business, but that doesn't stop the fact that they had their agenda and had been working it for 5,000 years. The reason there is supposed harmonization between all these religions is because the hive has been planting seeds of these harmonizing elements for 5,000 years. Since before Buddha, they were laying this shit. And what they intended to do was like casting a net out, and they were going to draw up the net and catch all of humanity in this net. And we were going to bring heaven down on earth. You seen that in your Bible, folks? Heaven on earth? Now you know what the fuck it means. So I'm sorry if this video kind of rambled a little bit, but it's there for food for thought. And the comment sections are open, and the discussion board is open for those, that want to get into this in a more in-depth manner. We do advise using the discussion board because that kind of centralizes things so people don't have to jump from video to video to read the comments. That's why we open the discussion board. So I'm hoping that this begets a lot of questions. I'm hoping it begets a lot of awareness. And for those of you doing the work, stay the course. Don't give up on yourselves.